Hi, my name's Sky. The day I got the lead role in our school play, I thought everything would finally change, but I didn't know how it would. That night, my sister pressed a hot curling iron against my face while I slept. My mom said it was an accident and made me sign a statement to say so. My dad, he just told me not to make a scene. But when the school nurse peeled off the bandage weeks later and saw what they tried to hide, everything started to unravel. What kind of family lets their child burn just to protect an image? And what happens when that child refuses to stay silent? They announced the cast list on a Monday. The hallway outside the theater department had never felt so narrow, like the walls were closing in on every single one of us, waiting to see who'd earned their shot under the lights. I wasn't even sure why I checked it. Part of me assumed, no, expected, not to see my name at all. Isolde always got the lead. She was the golden one, the trained soprano, the perfect daughter who'd been singing solos since we were kids. But that morning, taped to a sad piece of printer paper under the tacky marquee font, Christine, Sky Marlowe. I just stood there, my name, in bold, in ink. The hum of other students around me seemed to blur. Someone squealed. Someone muttered, "Seriously?" But all I could hear was my own pulse pounding in my ears. I wanted to smile, to run, to call someone, anyone, but I turned slowly and saw her. Isolde, standing 2 lockers down. Her lips were pressed so tight they'd gone white. No congratulatory hug, no fake smile, just a stare cold enough to peel paint. "You happy now?" she asked, barely audible. Her voice had this sharp edge, like she wasn't surprised, just wounded in a way that made me feel like the enemy. I shrugged. "I guess I did okay in the callback." She didn't respond. Just turned and walked away, every movement precise like she was on stage already. That night at dinner, my mom, Vera, clapped once. One slow, measured clap. "Let's try not to let this go to your head, Sky," she said. "You'll need a lot of work to be believable next to your sister." Alaric, my dad, barely looked up from his phone. I sat there with mashed potatoes turning cold on my plate, wondering what I was supposed to feel. Pride? Fear? Guilt? They didn't congratulate me. They didn't smile. Just silence and tension so thick I thought the ceiling would cave in. Later that night, I went to bed early. My alarm was set for 5:30 a.m. so I could get in some extra vocal warm-ups before school. I remember lying in bed, eyes on the ceiling, replaying the moment I saw my name again and again, trying to believe it was real. Somewhere in the dark, sleep came. And then it didn't. I woke up screaming. The pain hit before my brain even caught up. A blinding flash of heat seared across my cheek and temple. I thrashed. My fingers clawed the blanket. Something sizzled. When I opened my eyes, she was standing there. Isolde, hair perfect, silk robe tied too neatly for someone who just happened to be nearby. In her right hand, her curling iron, still glowing orange. I couldn't get the words out. The smell of burned skin, plastic, something chemical filled the room. "You weren't supposed to win," she whispered. "This was my year." She left without another word. I curled into the corner of my bed, gasping for breath, trying not to throw up from the pain. I don't remember how long I laid there before Vera stormed in. No panic, just annoyance. "Jesus, Sky, keep it down," she hissed. "You'll wake the neighbors." She didn't ask what happened. She didn't scream at Isolde. She yanked the comforter off the bed and stared at my face like I was the one who'd ruined something. "We need to fix this," she said flatly. "Can't have your drama jeopardizing your sister's college apps." "I didn't! She burned me!" I cried, voice hoarse. Vera rolled her eyes and yanked me toward the bathroom. She pulled open the cabinet, slathered some ointment on her fingers, and smeared it across my blistering cheek. It stung so badly I saw stars. "You'll say it was an accident," she said. "You were practicing for the role, curling your hair. It slipped. That's all." "No," I whispered. She held up a printed sheet, already prepared, already signed by her. A written statement for the school nurse. "I said you slipped, Sky," she said through clenched teeth. "You're not going to blow this up. Not when things are finally lining up." I looked at the paper, then at her. Her nails were perfectly done, no smudges. She'd had time to print, prepare, control everything. This wasn't a reaction, it was a plan. "You're siding with her?" I choked out. "I'm protecting all of us," she replied. She shoved a pen into my hand. My fingers were trembling. The bathroom mirror caught a glimpse of me, hair tangled, face red and blistered, eyes barely holding back tears. And still, I signed it. Not because I believed her, but because I knew, in that moment, no one else was going to protect me. Afterward, she handed me a scarf and told me to practice smiling in the mirror. I didn't. I couldn't. The next morning, I walked to school like nothing had happened. My skin burned with every gust of wind. Inside, something even worse had started to sting. I looked in the mirror one last time before heading out the door, and the reflection looking back at me wasn't me anymore. It was someone smaller, someone silenced. That was the first time I betrayed myself to protect everyone else. But that wasn't the only lie I had to tell. The morning after I signed the statement, I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of tea pressed gently to the side of my face. The swelling had set in overnight, and now even the smallest movements, chewing, speaking, blinking, sent shockwaves of pain down my jaw. The mint tea was lukewarm, but it was the only thing that didn't make me gag. The kitchen smelled like lemon disinfectant and burnt toast, a contrast to the quiet tension that filled the room. My father finally walked in, still in his hospital scrubs, clearly just home from his overnight shift. He barely looked at me. "Did you see her?" my mother asked, nodding toward me. Alaric set down his keys without responding. He moved to the fridge, pulled out a bottle of water, cracked the seal, and drank half of it before finally turning toward us. His eyes scanned my face. Not quickly, not with concern, like he was trying to calculate something. I straightened up, silently pleading for something, anything. A flicker of doubt, of outrage, of acknowledgement. Instead, he said, "You can't go to school like that, not looking like that." I blinked. Now that, he walked over, opened the medicine drawer, pulled out a silver tube, and held it out. "Apply this twice a day. Keep the wound clean. No direct sun. And wear something that covers it. People don't need to see that." "Are you serious?" I asked, voice cracking. "You're a doctor. You know this should be treated by—" "Let's keep this in-house," he interrupted, tone flat. "No need to escalate things." There it was. Not even subtle. No, "How did this happen?" No, "Do you need help?" Just a professional recommendation and a silent plea to keep the family's reputation untouched. My mom chimed in, "We've already handled it. Sky understands." I stared at them both, feeling less like a daughter and more like an unwanted liability. By the time I got to school, the makeup Vera had layered on my cheek was already cracking. It wasn't even foundation. It was this heavy theater-grade concealer she'd found in the back of the bathroom cabinet. The kind of thing you'd use to hide stage bruises, not real ones. First period dragged by in a haze. No one said anything, but they looked. I kept my head low, answering questions with nods or one-word mumbles. Every glance felt like a silent accusation. Between second and third period, I passed the bulletin board in the office hallway, the same one where they'd posted the cast list. But this time, it was covered in a new flyer. Spring Gala sponsors. Special thanks to the Marlowe Foundation for the Arts. I felt the blood drain from my face. My mother hadn't just forced me into silence, she'd bought my silence in advance. That was her play. Wrap our family name in enough goodwill, people wouldn't question the bruises underneath. During lunch, I sat outside behind the science wing. Fewer people passed through there. I picked at a granola bar and stared at the pavement. The sharp wind carried over snippets of voices from across the yard. I heard she did it to herself. Like for attention. That's what my mom said. Drama girls are all nuts anyway. Her sister's so talented. I bet she's sick of being overshadowed. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I reached up and pressed gently against the side of my face. The skin felt stretched, tight, fragile. Miss Martin, the drama teacher, avoided my gaze when I walked past her after lunch. She was talking to the principal, and both of them quieted the moment I entered the office to drop off a late pass. Their fake smiles were transparent. That evening, Vera was waiting for me at the kitchen counter. "I spoke with Miss Martin," she said without looking up from her phone. "She's supportive. We've agreed it's best to limit unnecessary distractions backstage." I dropped my backpack louder than I needed to. Distractions? Like what? My face? My existence? She finally looked at me. "Like drama, Sky. This is your sister's last year." "Let's not ruin that." I opened my mouth, but she raised her hand. "Don't start. You already agreed." "No, I hadn't. I'd signed a lie. That's different." My dad passed through on his way to the living room. "Let it go, Sky. You don't want to be the reason the school gets dragged into something it can't clean up." Clean up. That was their priority. Bleach the stains, hide the cracks, paint over the mold. Later that night, I stood in the bathroom again, same mirror, same lighting, but a different reflection. My cheek was a patchwork of scabs and raw skin. My eyes looked sunken. I reached for the concealer, but stopped. I left the bathroom light on and the door half open, walked down the hall, and stood in front of Isolda's bedroom. Her door was closed. I could hear her singing softly inside, practicing a ballad from the show. Her voice, flawless as always, echoed through the thin wall. I knocked once. Silence. Then her voice, cool and casual. "If you're looking for sympathy, I'm all out." I didn't say anything. Just stood there, the heat from my injury pulsing like a drumbeat. Finally, I said, "You didn't just hurt me. You erased me." She laughed quietly. "Oh, please, don't be dramatic. No one would have believed you anyway." I turned and walked away, because she was right. At least, for now. After that hallway exchange with Isolda, I went straight to my room. I didn't slam the door or scream into a pillow like a teenager in a bad drama. I just stood there, staring at the wall, as if waiting for it to speak up and confirm everything I was afraid to admit. Later that night, long after everyone else had turned in, I found myself lying awake, staring at the cracks in the ceiling. The pain in my cheek had dulled to a constant throb, no longer screaming, just whispering that it hadn't gone away. I pressed my hand gently to it and felt the texture of healing skin beneath the layers of ointment and concealer. But the real pain wasn't in the wound anymore. It was in the questions that kept circling in my head. Why did she sound so calm when she did it? How did my mom have a statement ready so fast? And why did my dad know exactly what medicine to give me without asking what really happened? None of this was new. That's what started to get to me. Around 2 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and got out of bed. I tiptoed down the hallway. The house was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards under my bare feet. I passed Isolda's door. It was cracked open slightly, and her TV cast flickering blue light across the hallway. She was asleep on her side, facing the wall, as if none of this touched her. I turned toward the study. That room was mostly off-limits to me, not explicitly, but in the way that some rooms carry silence like a lock. My mother used it as her personal organization space, and I knew she kept all our important files there. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe a clue that this wasn't all in my head. I sat down at the desk, flipped on the small lamp, and opened the top drawer. Bills, PTA schedules, notes from Vera's church group. Everything filed and color-coded. The second drawer was messier. Loose envelopes, an old checkbook, a stack of family photos I hadn't seen in years. I reached past those and opened the bottom drawer, stiff, like it hadn't been used in a while. Inside, tucked in a file labeled Family Notes, I saw a folded piece of stationery with my name written on the corner. No, not my name. Isolda's handwriting. I opened it carefully. The paper was creased and slightly yellowed. The ink had faded just enough to look aged. "Sky, I'm sorry about the stairs. I didn't mean to push you that hard. I was mad you got the solo and I didn't. Please don't tell Mom. She'll be furious. I swear I didn't mean for you to get that hurt." My hands began to shake. The stairs. It hit me like a gust of wind through a broken window. Years ago in 7th grade, I'd fallen down the back stairs at home. I'd hit my head and fractured my wrist. Everyone thought I slipped. Vera said, "That's what happens when you run around like a maniac." But I hadn't been running. I'd been coming downstairs with a music binder, and Isolde had been behind me. I flipped the letter over. On the back, stuck to the corner, was a yellow sticky note in my mother's neat, rigid handwriting. Never let her see this. My stomach clenched. It wasn't just about this week or this role. It had never been. I sank back in the chair, the letter trembling in my hands, and let the weight of it all settle in my chest. The gaslighting, the cover-ups, the polite smiles over bruises. This wasn't about protecting the family. It was about protecting Isolde's place in it. And Vera, she hadn't just looked the other way. She'd actively hidden the evidence. I sat there for what felt like an hour, eyes darting across the lines of ink again and again. All those moments I'd dismissed, all those times I'd blamed myself for being clumsy, too sensitive, too dramatic, they started stacking up like bricks. There was the deleted video from my scholarship audition that vanished the night before the deadline. There was the lost letter from the summer theater program that Vera said must have been a mix-up in the mail. There was the time my favorite dress was found in the trash days before my choir solo. Now it all felt intentional. I folded the letter and tucked it into the waistband of my pajama pants. I didn't trust it in my pocket, not when someone could toss it before morning. On the way back to my room, I paused in front of my parents' bedroom door. From inside, I could hear the low buzz of the TV. They were still awake, probably watching the news, sipping wine, wrapped in the delusion of normalcy they worked so hard to maintain. And me? I'd finally woken up. Back in bed, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My mind played through the past like a silent film on repeat. I saw every bruise, every glance away, every fake smile from teachers who'd heard rumors but never asked questions. And I whispered to myself, so low it barely reached my own ears. I've been taught to protect everyone, but who's protected me? The room didn't answer, but I knew one thing. This time, I wouldn't let it go. The letter never left my possession after that night. I folded it carefully and slid it behind the mirror in my bedroom, right at the edge of the frame where no one else would think to look. Every time I passed it, every time I touched that corner, it reminded me that the version of my family I'd always clung to, orderly, respectable, unified, was a story Vera had curated like a PR campaign. By the time Friday rolled around, the bruising on my cheek had started to fade into a muddled blend of yellow and gray. The pain was duller, but it pulsed beneath the surface like a warning signal. I got up early, took my time applying concealer in layers, smoothing it out as best as I could with the cheap sponge from my drawer. I pulled my hair forward, even though I hated how it hung in my face, and stared at the reflection. It wasn't perfect, but I looked presentable, enough to avoid another round of whispers. I got to school a few minutes before the bell, slipping into the side hallway where the drama bulletin board was posted. My steps slowed when I saw the crowd clustered around it, faces tilted upward, eyes scanning. Something had changed. I squeezed past a few freshmen, and there it was, the updated cast list for the spring musical. The same white sheet, same bold typeface, same location, except now, the lead read, Christine, Isolde Marlowe. My name was gone. No strike-through, no footnote, no explanation. It was like I'd never existed. Miss Martin passed behind me as I stared. She didn't pause, didn't greet me, just walked into the theater room with her clipboard tucked close to her chest. I followed her. Inside, the stage lights were on low, casting soft shadows across the black box stage. A few of the other cast members were setting props, chattering lightly about rehearsal changes. I walked straight to her office in the back corner, knocked once, and stepped in. She looked up, startled. "Sky, can I help you?" I held up my hand, keeping my voice steady. "What happened to the cast list?" Miss Martin sighed, setting her clipboard aside. "I was going to talk to you this morning." I waited. "We thought it would be best to make some adjustments," she said, "given everything that's happened." I took a step forward. "What does that mean?" She leaned back in her chair. "You've been under a lot of stress. The accident, the tension with your sister. Your mom mentioned it might be overwhelming for you. My mom? I blinked. So she came to you? She expressed concern for your well-being, Miss Martin said, choosing each word like they might be dissected in a courtroom, and for the harmony of the ensemble. I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked, did anyone ask me how I felt? She didn't answer, and that told me everything. I left the office without another word. My hands were trembling by the time I reached the edge of the theater. Isolde was center stage, chatting with the choreographer, laughing like none of it mattered, like I hadn't earned that role, like she hadn't taken something she had no right to touch. I turned and walked out. My legs carried me down the side hallway and into the art wing. I found a quiet classroom, empty, used mostly for sculpture storage, and closed the door behind me. Then I pulled out my phone. I opened the camera, switched to front-facing mode, and hit record. The screen lit up my face, uneven and pale under the fluorescence. The swelling had eased, but the discoloration was still there, even beneath the makeup. My name is Sky Marlowe, I said. And if you're watching this, it means someone finally cared enough to ask what really happened. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just told the truth. I talked about the night Isolde burned me, about how Vera handed me a pre-written lie and told me to sign it, about the way Alaric, a doctor, refused to treat me properly because it might make people talk, about losing my role, my place, and slowly, the sense that I'd ever belonged anywhere in that family. When I finished, I saved the video and emailed it to myself, storing it in a locked folder with a duplicate copy in the cloud. Then I took a photo of the updated cast list and another of my reflection in the classroom window, bruise and all. They had taken my role, my voice, my presence in the very thing I loved most. But they couldn't erase my truth unless I let them. That evening, after I got home, I didn't sit at the dinner table. I went straight upstairs, closed my door, and started writing everything down. Not for school, not for anyone else, just for me, for the record. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I heard laughter downstairs. Vera's crisp voice, Isolde's delicate giggle, Alaric's low murmur. They were celebrating, probably toasting a clean solution. But I wasn't part of that scene anymore. And for the first time, I didn't want to be. I never thought silence could sound so loud, until I stood in the locker-lined hallway, clutching my phone, reading that message. It was right after second period, just before lunch. I ducked into the restroom near the art wing, trying to avoid another awkward encounter with Miss Martin or one of the cast members who still pretended like I didn't exist. I opened my phone, mostly to distract myself, when the text came in. No contact name, no profile picture, just 5 words. Step back. Or we'll finish what we started. Followed by a single emoji, a small flame. That wasn't just some random threat. That symbol, one Isolde used in her old captions on Instagram whenever she performed, was her little signature, a subtle flourish, always styled the same way. My fingers went cold. At first, I froze. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered. The stall door behind me creaked open slowly, even though no one was in there. Everything around me felt like it was pressing inward. I read it again, then again. By the third time, fear had taken a back seat to something else, something sharper, more deliberate. I locked the phone, took a deep breath, and walked out of the restroom. No one was waiting, no one was watching, which somehow made it worse. That afternoon, instead of heading to rehearsal, or what had become Isolde's rehearsal, I went to the library. The far back corner where the old desktop computers sat unused. I logged into my school email, opened a draft folder, and began typing. A full record, dates, incidents, the video I'd recorded in the sculpture room, a scan of the letter Isolde had written about the stair accident, photos of the cast list, the texts. I embedded everything into a private folder on my drive. Then I opened the settings on my school account and created a rule. If the school nurse updated my health file again, a copy of the folder would be automatically sent to the district superintendent, the local newspaper editor, and the backup email I'd set up under a pseudonym. No theatrics, no drama, just preparation. The next day, I added voice, a quiet recording, filmed in my bedroom with the blinds drawn. My face was mostly in shadow, half because I wanted the privacy, and half because I wanted whoever watched it to focus on the words. "I'm not trying to ruin anyone," I said calmly. "I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it because being silent hasn't kept me safe, and because being erased again and again is its own kind of violence." I saved the video and placed it in the drive. Then I encrypted the folder with a password only I knew, tied to something no one in my family would ever guess. That evening, as I passed through the hallway outside the gym, I saw Isolde standing at her locker, alone for once. She wasn't smiling. She looked almost bored, twirling her keychain with one hand, staring at the mirror she'd taped inside. I didn't hesitate. "Isolde." She turned, slowly. "Wow, you're still here?" I stepped closer, close enough that she couldn't pretend not to hear me. "I'm not going to disappear," I said evenly. "And if anything else happens, if you touch me, if you threaten me again, it's all going public." She rolled her eyes. "You sound like one of those girls in movies, monologuing in the hallway." "I'm not performing," I said. "I'm warning you. I've got records, videos, files, timestamps. You won't talk your way out of this." She smirked, but I saw it, that little twitch in her jaw, the subtle shift in her stance. "You're bluffing," she said. "Try me." Then I walked away. No yelling, no insults, just the truth, spoken plainly. That night, I felt it again, that flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not safety, not hope, but control. Still, I knew it wasn't over. Vera came into my room later, holding a cup of tea. "I heard you're spending more time in the library," she said casually, setting the mug down on my desk. "I like the quiet," I answered, without turning. She hovered a moment longer. "You know, your sister's worked very hard. She doesn't need the added stress of dealing with all this noise." "Is that what you call it?" I asked. "Noise?" Her smile tightened. "I call it unnecessary distraction." I turned in my chair, looked her square in the eye. "You've spent a lot of time protecting her." "She needs it," Vera replied. "She's sensitive. She paused. "You're stronger." That was always her excuse, her way of rewriting every betrayal as favor. "You can handle it, Sky. You're more mature. You know how the world works." But the truth? She just didn't care to defend me. When she left the room, I didn't touch the tea. I opened my laptop instead and re-watched the video, not to change anything, just to remind myself I wasn't imagining it. The next morning at school, as I walked down the east hallway toward my locker, a group of juniors passed by. One of them whispered something to her friend. They both turned to look at me. I didn't bother listening in. Let them talk. Let them wonder. I wasn't hiding anymore. The next morning, I left the house earlier than usual. The sun was barely rising, casting long shadows across the lawn as I zipped up my hoodie and crossed the driveway. I didn't eat, didn't speak to anyone. Vera was in the kitchen, whispering on the phone when I passed by, probably to Miss Martin again. Alaric didn't even look up from his laptop. I walked the half-mile to school with one goal in mind: check the new rehearsal schedule. Part of me expected it, had rehearsed the possibility in my head the entire night. But seeing it, that made it real. The cast list was posted on the wall near the auditorium doors. I slowed as I approached, trying not to draw attention. The paper was crisp, just taped up minutes ago. The list of names was typed neatly, each role highlighted in bold. But my name wasn't there, not even in the ensemble. Christine, Isolde Marlowe. I stood still, eyes scanning the sheet again and again, as if somehow I'd missed something, as if maybe my name had been pushed down to another section. It hadn't. Behind me, footsteps approached. I turned. Miss Martin was walking toward the auditorium doors, carrying her clipboard. When she saw me standing there, she paused but didn't look surprised. "Sky," she said softly. "Come with me." We walked into the empty auditorium. The lights were dimmed, the stage bathed in the blue glow of early morning through the high windows. She led me to the front row and gestured for me to sit. I remained standing. "I saw the list," I said. "Is this a mistake?" She didn't answer right away. Your mom and I spoke again yesterday, she began. There's been a lot of tension, disruption. We decided, well, I decided, it would be better for the overall stability of the cast to move forward with someone more consistent. You mean my sister, I said. She's focused, less emotional. I stared at her. Less emotional? After what she did? Miss Martin's face tightened. Sky, I don't want to get into family issues. That's not my role. You mean it's not convenient, I replied. She looked away. I left before she could say anything else. I didn't cry. Not then. I walked through the building like a ghost, numb from the neck down, drifting past classmates and teachers who didn't meet my eyes. As I reached my locker, I spotted Emma standing nearby, pretending to dig through her bag. She saw me and froze. I took a step toward her. You knew, didn't you? Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. Sky, you were there the night I got burned. You saw the bruise the next morning. You even helped me cover it with makeup. She looked down. I thought, maybe it was an accident, that you'd dropped the curler or something. I didn't want to assume. You didn't want to get involved, I said. She nodded once. And now that I'm out of the show, that spot in the duet, you're getting it? Silence. I laughed. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't even angry, just hollow. I get it. You kept quiet for a solo. How fitting. Sky, that's not fair. What's not fair is pretending to be my friend when it's convenient, and a stranger when it costs you something. I turned and walked away. By lunch, the shock had worn off, replaced with something sharper, controlled, cold. Back in the library, I opened the shared drive where I'd been storing everything, my video logs, scanned files, the auto-send triggers. I added a new video. This one was shorter. No introduction, no explanations. Just me, in the corner of the study room, looking directly at the lens. People don't always hurt you by hitting you, I said. Sometimes they do it by stepping aside and letting others swing. I paused. And sometimes, it's your oldest friend. After saving it, I sent a quiet link to Miss Carter, my former English teacher. She'd left the school 2 years ago, but still worked in the district office. If anyone might believe me, might actually do something with this, it was her. I didn't include a message, just the file. After school, I skipped rehearsal completely, walked straight home. Vera was in the garden, pruning roses like we weren't all living inside a house of broken glass. Did you see the cast changes? She asked without looking up. I did. She finally turned to face me. I hope you understand. This isn't personal, Sky. It's about what's best for the production. I tilted my head. You mean what's best for your reputation? She blinked. That's not fair. It's the truth. She straightened, holding the pruning shears with both hands. You always make things harder than they need to be. No, Mom, I said. You do, by pretending nothing's wrong and blaming me when the truth shows up. And I walked past her, into the house, the sting of rosewater and fertilizer lingering in my nose. That night, I didn't add anything else to my folder. I didn't need to. Sometimes silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. The hallway was dim when I left rehearsal. The soft glow of late afternoon filtered through the high windows, casting streaks of gold across the linoleum floor. I walked past the bulletin board with my name still absent, past the echo of voices rehearsing lines that once belonged to me. Everything felt quieter, like the building itself was holding its breath. I didn't head home. Instead, I turned toward the nurse's office. It wasn't a dramatic decision. No plan, no theatrics, just a weight inside me that pushed my feet forward, as if my body knew what needed to happen before my mind caught up. When I arrived, Nurse Maribel looked up from her desk. She was reviewing folders, her glasses perched low on her nose. Her expression softened when she saw me. Sky, she said gently, you're just in time. We've got your follow-up scheduled today. I nodded. My throat was tight. She gestured to the cot in the corner of the room. I sat down slowly, pulling my hoodie back, revealing the gauze that still covered my cheek and temple. The fabric itched from sweat and time. I hadn't changed it since that morning. Maribel washed her hands, pulled on gloves, and walked over with practiced calm. She reached for the edge of the bandage, pausing for a moment. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded again, this time with a little more air in my lungs. As she peeled the tape gently, layer by layer, as the bandage came away, I could feel cool air hitting raw skin beneath. Her hand paused. I looked at her face. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at my cheek, staring long enough that the silence felt like thunder between us. Her voice was lower when she spoke. "Sky, these aren't accidental." The words didn't surprise me, but hearing them, out loud, from someone who wasn't part of the house I lived in, it was like a dam cracked. She reached for a clean pad and dabbed lightly around the area, careful not to touch the burn directly. Then she stood up, walked to her desk, and pulled out a form. "I have to report this," she said. "You understand that, right?" I didn't hesitate. "Please," I whispered. She looked up, eyes sharp and kind at once. She nodded, reached for the phone, and began dialing. I sat there, not moving, barely breathing, as she spoke in her low, steady tone to someone on the other end. I didn't need to hear the words. I knew who she was calling: Child Protective Services, mandatory reporting, burn patterns inconsistent with self-infliction. And just like that, everything started. Within 45 minutes, 2 officers arrived at the school. They didn't come with sirens or uniforms. They wore plain clothes. One woman in a navy blazer, one man with a quiet presence. They checked in with the front office. I could see the ripple move through the building from my spot at the end of the hallway, like a pebble dropped into still water. The woman, Detective Bennett, came into the nurse's office and introduced herself. She sat beside me while Maribel stayed at her desk, filing things but clearly listening. "We've received a report," Bennett said. "We'd like to ask you some questions." I nodded, hands folded in my lap. She was kind, careful. She didn't ask me to relive the burn, just asked how it happened, when, who was there. I told her about the night. The curling iron, the sound it made, how Isolde just stood there, unmoved. Bennett's jaw clenched slightly. She wrote it all down, then looked up. "Thank you, Sky. You did the right thing coming in." By the time the bell rang for final period, the detectives had moved to the main office. The whispers started immediately, groups of students standing around lockers, glancing toward the front entrance. I stayed tucked in the corner of the nurse's office until Bennett told me I could go. But I didn't go home. Instead, I walked toward the auditorium. Inside, rehearsal was in full swing. Isolde stood at center stage, singing the high note in her solo. Her voice filled the space, as perfect as always, crisp and bright. Miss Martin stood at the back of the auditorium, arms folded, nodding along. I stayed behind the doors, watching through the small window. Then the main doors opened again. The detectives entered. Everyone noticed immediately. The piano stopped. Isolde's voice trailed off mid-sentence. A few cast members whispered. Miss Martin straightened, confused, then alarmed. Detective Bennett stepped forward, addressed the group calmly. "Sorry to interrupt. We're looking for Vera Marlowe and Isolde Marlowe." There was a beat of silence. Then Isolde stepped off the stage slowly. Her face paled. From behind me, I heard the sharp click of heels. Vera had arrived. She pushed past me without a word, marching straight to the front. "Officers," she said smoothly, "I'd appreciate it if you contacted us through legal channels. This is a school. These are children." Bennett didn't flinch. She reached into her bag, pulled out 2 envelopes, and handed one to Vera. "This is a formal summons. We'll be following up within 48 hours. Please have representation available." The other detective handed Isolde a separate envelope. Students began whispering. A few pulled out their phones, but Miss Martin barked out, "No filming!" "Put those away!" Vera turned toward me then, her eyes sharp, mouth tight. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Her glare said it all. "You broke the rules. You brought this on us." But I didn't flinch. I didn't run. I stood tall in the back of the auditorium, just watching. Because this time, they were the ones exposed. When the detectives left, rehearsal broke early. Isolde disappeared into the dressing rooms, Vera trailing behind her. I stayed seated in the back row, the stillness of the room settling around me. My heart was beating, but not fast, just steady. Maribel walked in quietly. She crossed the auditorium and sat beside me without a word. After a moment, she said, "You were right to wait." I looked at her. She didn't smile, neither did I. But I breathed. Finally, for once, I didn't have to explain. I didn't have to defend. For once, the truth was louder than their performance, and it wasn't my voice saying it. The final curtain call of rehearsal week ended just before sunset. As students filtered out of the auditorium, chatting about costumes, cues, and cast party plans, I stayed behind, tucked into the shadows near stage left, where the scent of old velvet and pine from last month's Christmas set still lingered in the air. I wasn't there to perform, not anymore. But I wasn't there to disappear either. Opening night was less than 24 hours away. I didn't rehearse. I didn't need to. I already knew every line, every cue, every lighting change. I knew because I had lived them, until I was erased from the role I earned. But now, I was playing a different part, one with more gravity than applause. Later that evening, I sat cross-legged in the hallway outside the dressing rooms, headphones in, eyes closed, letting the score play through one last time. I could hear Isolde's voice in the background, rehearsing scales behind the thick wall. She was still chasing perfection, even now. Her notes were flawless, but I heard the strain in her breath, the small break in her voice she probably blamed on dust or allergies. But I knew better. She was nervous, because she knew the spotlight didn't belong to her anymore. Not truly. Friday arrived like a held breath. The building buzzed all morning. Teachers smiled more. The principal gave his usual, "Let's make this a night to remember" speech on the morning announcements. Parents and donors were expected, the superintendent too, maybe even a local news team. The show started at 7 p.m. By 6 I was sitting backstage, not in costume, but in black jeans and a soft blue sweater. I'd told Miss Martin I was there to help with transitions and crew traffic. She accepted that answer quickly. Too quickly, like she didn't want to admit she was relieved I wasn't making waves. But I had no intention of staying invisible. Through the gaps in the side curtains, I watched the audience fill in row by row. Maribel arrived early and took a seat in the front. Her posture was still focused. She didn't look for me, but I knew she was there for more than the performance. I scanned the crowd. Alaric was seated near the aisle. Vera, next to him, crossed her legs and adjusted her scarf 3 times before the lights dimmed. No sign of Isolde's friends. Odd. The music began. Isolde entered stage right, cloaked in the deep red costume meant for Christine. The audience clapped politely. Her voice rang out across the theater with confidence, but I saw the tremble in her hands when she lifted them toward the phantom during her solo. She was hitting the notes, but something wasn't connecting. The warmth, the vulnerability, it wasn't there. Halfway through the second act, a missed entrance caused a ripple backstage. The soundboard operator fumbled to cover the silence with an early music cue. Isolde recovered quickly, but the moment passed awkwardly. Her pacing quickened. She sang louder than necessary. Desperation seeped through the seams of the role she'd stolen. Then, during the final number, I walked toward the edge of the wings, stopping just short of the curtain line. From where I stood, the stage lights created a halo around the scene. My body was half-shadowed, invisible to the audience. But in that moment, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt grounded. I watched her hit the final note and turned to bow. And just as the applause began, light, polite, nothing like she expected, I stepped forward, not onto the stage, just enough that the house lights caught me, briefly. A few gasps. Vera turned her head sharply. Alaric leaned forward. And then, Maribel stood and clapped, once, twice, then again. The rest of the audience hesitated, unsure. Some followed her lead, some didn't. But in that moment, I wasn't the one trying to be seen. I already was. After the show, I stayed behind as the rest of the cast celebrated in the hallway, trading flowers and selfies. Isolde exited the stage door with a fixed smile, cheeks flushed, mascara just beginning to run at the corners. She avoided my eyes as she passed. No words. I waited until most of the crowd had gone before heading toward the main office where the flowers were being sorted for the cast. One bouquet sat apart, roses, lavender wrapping, a gold card. To Annabelle, you were magnificent. Love, Mom. I stared at the card for a full 10 seconds before lifting it gently. Annabelle was Isolde's middle name. I didn't cry. I didn't even sigh. Instead, I walked it over to the nearest trash bin and dropped it in. On my way out of the building, I handed the bouquet to the janitor near the entrance. "Would you like these?" I asked. He looked surprised. Sure." I smiled politely. They weren't meant for me. Outside, the night air was crisp. Spring had finally started to take root. The sky above the auditorium was deep indigo, and I could hear the muffled cheers from the cast party spilling out from the cafeteria wing. But I wasn't heading there. As I walked across the lot, my phone buzzed. A text from Maribel. "You stood taller than anyone on that stage." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I typed slowly, carefully. "If they can't say my name, they don't get to write my story." Then I put the phone in my pocket and kept walking, one step at a time, away from the theater, away from the noise, toward whatever came next. The stage was done, but my life, my real life, was just beginning. 3 days after the final curtain call, I packed my bags quietly while the rest of the house slept. It wasn't dramatic. No yelling, no slammed doors, no last-minute arguments. I simply folded my clothes, tucked my journal between 2 sweaters, and slipped the letter Isolde wrote years ago into my back pocket. Celestine, my grandmother, met me at the curb in her old Buick. She didn't say much when I climbed in, just leaned over, kissed the top of my head, and said, "We've got fresh biscuits and honey waiting at the house. You hungry, baby?" I was starving, but not just for food. Her home sat on the outskirts of town, past the rows of identical subdivisions and into the quiet where properties were spaced out and porches still had rocking chairs. When we pulled into her gravel driveway, the wind chimes hanging from the eaves greeted us like old friends. Their gentle music stirred something in my chest that had been locked away for too long. Inside, the smell of cinnamon and something buttery greeted me before the door had even closed behind us. The kitchen light was warm. The table already set for 2. A teapot hissed quietly on the stove. Celestine didn't pepper me with questions. She didn't ask for explanations or make me relive anything. She simply set down a plate, poured a cup of tea, and said, "You're safe now, and you don't owe anyone anything, not even answers." That night, after dinner, I pulled out my old journal. Not the one I used to fake gratitude or track school projects, the one I kept hidden, half filled with entries I'd started but never finished. I opened to a blank page and wrote, "Today, I came home." Days passed gently. My bruises faded. My mind cleared. The silence wasn't oppressive here, it was healing. Celestine would hum old gospel songs while folding laundry. We'd take walks in the early evening, just past dusk, when the world turned blue and quiet and forgiving. One morning, I woke up with a sentence echoing in my head. The bandage wasn't just over the wound, it was over the truth. That line stayed with me all day, lingering through breakfast, following me while I read on the back porch, whispering in my ear while I helped Celestine prune the rose bushes. That evening, I opened my laptop and began writing. The bandage became a one-act play, simple in form, but full in weight. It followed a girl who was hurt in the place she was supposed to feel safest. Each scene peeled back a layer, not just of her injury, but of the silence that followed it, the faces that looked away, the people who said, "You're exaggerating," or worse, "Don't make this a big deal." Miss Carter, my former English teacher, and now my quiet lifeline, offered to help me stage it at the local community theater. She read the script in one sitting, called me afterward, and said, "This isn't just a play, Sky. This is you reclaiming your voice." We started auditions the next week. I didn't cast Isolde types. I cast kids who'd always been pushed to the background, the ones who never got solos, who ate lunch alone, who flinched when someone raised their voice. They came alive on stage in ways I never expected. One girl sobbed during a monologue, not because she forgot her lines, but because they hit too close to her own life. Opening night came quickly. I wore black slacks and a blue blouse, the same color as the sweater I wore the night I watched Isolde perform from the wings. Miss Carter stood backstage with me before the doors opened, her hand on my shoulder. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded. I think I've been ready for a long time. The audience was quiet that night. Not the kind of silence that waits for a performance to begin, but the kind that comes when people know something real is about to unfold. Halfway through the second scene, I stepped into the aisle just to observe from a different angle. That's when I saw them, Vera and Isolde, standing outside the lobby window, just far enough to see the stage, but not allowed inside. Celestine had made sure of that. "We have the right to deny entry to anyone who made her bleed," she'd said plainly to the box office staff that afternoon. Security approached them gently. They didn't argue, they just watched. I didn't flinch, I didn't hide, and I didn't wave. Because they didn't belong in my story anymore. The play ended with a standing ovation. Not thunderous, not overwhelming, but respectful. Moved. Sincere. Maribel stood first. Miss Carter followed, then the rest. Afterward, backstage, one of the younger cast members hugged me and whispered, "I didn't know someone could write about stuff like this." I smiled. We can write about anything, especially the things we're told to forget. Later that night, back at Celestine's, I stood at the kitchen sink washing a teacup when she came in. "You were something else tonight," she said. I turned, drying my hands. "Thanks." She walked over, held my chin gently between her fingers. "Your mama may not see it yet, but I do. You're rewriting the name they tried to take." I nodded, eyes stinging. Before bed, I added one final line to my journal. "Some scars don't fade, but they can be the start of something beautiful, if you stop covering them." Some scars you see, others you carry in silence, but neither should be hidden forever. Sky's story reminds us that protecting an image should never come before protecting a child. Have you ever been told to stay silent for the sake of family? What would you do if speaking out meant finally being seen? If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. There's more truth and more strength waiting in the next one.